now that we've taken a general look at the pros and cons, handling and care of your Warhounds, I guess we should talk a little bit about loadouts, and I'll suggest a few builds you can do and how they're beneficial. A lot of these you can find online. I didn't come up with these myself, but I'll throw them in here just to keep with the theme of the post. The first one, and by far the most common, is the multi-role or generalist Warhound. Either one of these loadouts are your best bet if you're not sure what to load your Warhound out with. It's really versatile and good against almost all targets. The first one is a plasma blast gun with a Vulcan Megafaulter. What makes this one so good is no matter the target, you'll find it useful. Its Vulcan Megafaulter is great for stripping shields on an opponent. The plasma blast gun's pretty good at doing hits to armor, and it's really good at putting the hurt on some knights. The weapons also work really well together in a kind of 1-2 punch combination. So you would use the Megafaulter to drop the shields, and then follow up with the plasma gun to lay on some heavy hurt and damage some knights or armor. Or you could maximal fire the plasma gun, moving it from strength 8 to strength 10 to do even more damage to a target. The downside of this one is it can be reactor intensive depending on how much you want to boost your plasma gun for that strength 10, but it's not necessarily a for sure thing. Really depends on what you come up against. You may not maximal fire at all. One of the big limiting points of it is, though, because the Vulcan Megafaulter is so weak and the plasma gun is a blast weapon, meaning it uses a template, you can't actually do called shots with this loadout. Like, I can't say I specifically want to aim for my opponent's body with the plasma gun. And because the Vulcan Megafaulter is so weak, you'll have a hard time doing damage to specific locations unless their structure track is heavily damaged already. In a bit of a contrast, another multi-role loadout to look at is the Vulcan Megafaulter combined with a Turbo Laser Destructor. This one's got actually better shield dropping output than the previous one, because you can use the Vulcan Megafaulter to drop the shields. If the bolter doesn't drop the shields, you can push your reactor to Shield Bane the Turbo Laser. What this does is makes your opponent's Void Shield saves one worse than normal, or you can use the Megafaulter to drop the shields and fire the Turbo Laser as per normal at strength 8. Now the nice thing about the Turbo Laser is because it's not a template weapon, you can actually called shot this weapon. So I can say I want to put shots into my opponent's damaged body. Of course there's a minus to hit for the called shots, but at least you have the option of deciding where your shots land. This one, like the previous one, it's not overly reactor intensive for the weapon loadout. Like, you're not going to be shield baning the Turbo Laser every time. It's decent against armor, but because it's stuck at strength 8, you find it's not as effective as a plasma blast gun. So if you weren't sure where to go with a Warhound, I'd say start out with either one of these two multi-role loadouts and see if you can identify any gaps or things you want filled, but they're the go-to starting point for a lot of players. The next one, and I love using this one, especially in squadrons, is the Sharpshooter, we'll call it. This is a loadout of 2 Turbo Laser Destructors. This loadout has the best range you could get out of a Warhound. They're Oh, off the top of my head, 32 or 36-inch range compared to the usual 24. It's decent anti-armor. You're getting 4 shots at strength 8. Odds are pretty good you'll hurt armor with at least one of those shots. If you're in a pinch and you come up against a shielded target, you could Shield Bane all 4 of those shots for 2 pushes to your reactor, giving you some shield dropping potential. It's not the best. Where it excels, though, is against unshielded, damaged targets. You can cold shot all 4 of those shots, allowing you to really put the hurt on, say, an opponent's damaged body or damaged legs. This one also works best in a support role. So, say you had a squadron of Warhounds running around. You could use that squadron to drop the shields of your opponents, and then have this loadout sitting in the back just to fire some shots in downrange and finish the job. Speaking of a support role, we'll talk about the Shield Buster. I'm not a big fan of this loadout myself. I find it's way too much of a one-trick pony, and it's great at the start of game because you can drop your opponent's shields in no time, but I find later game the Vulcan Megafaulters just don't do enough for me to finish things off like Warlords unless they're insanely damaged, and then it just becomes very situational. But where a loadout like this is extremely handy is when you use this guy to support your Warlords or Reaver Titans. What you can do is send this guy straight at your opponent and drop their shields, and then use your bigger guns on the bigger Titans to lay the hurt on the armor of your opponent. Another good thing about this one is it doesn't push your reactor at all. Unless you're pushing for turns and speed, you're not going to touch the reactor with this. It's also the cheapest loadout you can possibly put on a Warhound. So, if you have a need to drop your opponent's shields, this is definitely the one to look at. And it throws out about 12 shots. With that many shots, it could do some harm to knights, but it's lacking in the high strength, considering it's only limited to strength 4. Not a bad loadout to look at, though, if you have a specific need in mind. The last one I want to talk about is what I'll call the Titan Guard. I like using this loadout, to protect my Warlords or my Reavers. It works really well in things like a Regia Maniple. And what you do is just keep a Warhound like this attached to the hip of your Warlord or Reaver. The weapon loadout for this build is a Plasma Blast Gun and a Flamer. And how I like to use these is I'll have it babysit my big guns in the backfield, and when something like a group of Knights or another Warhound comes running into my backline or goes after my Warlords, I'll send the Titan Guard loadout out as an interceptor. It'll run out, use the Flamer to drop shields, and the Plasma Gun to hurt armor, or just a bunch of shots against a group of Knights, do the damage it can, and buy my Warlords some time to move or throw shots where they're needed. It's a really good support loadout for stuff you don't want getting outnumbered. Like, if a Warlord gets surrounded by Knights, it's really hard to get yourself out of, and a loadout like this is great for the defense role. So, almost 10 minutes later, and after watching this myself, I'm realizing I spelled shield wrong for the whole thing. Apologies if that was driving you nuts, but otherwise, I hope this gives you a good starting point for your Warhounds and the weapon loadouts you can use. Take it easy, I'll catch you on the next one.